All right, so have you ever finished a book and felt like you only scratched the surface?
I know what you mean.
Like everyone's heard the title, but the actual story, it's a whole other thing, right?
Definitely. Happens all the time.
That's us with Don Quixote. We're going past those windmill jokes to get why it's considered a masterpiece after all these centuries.
It's true, the book has really resonated through time.
And get this, we're going right to the source, reading the original Spanish.
Wow. Going straight to the original Spanish text, that's ambitious.
You ready for this deep dive?
Absolutely, let's do it. I think there's something about experiencing those iconic scenes in Cervantes' words, you know?
Yeah.
It just adds another layer, like to the humor and satire that you might not get otherwise.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so Don Quixote, he doesn't just start out a knight-errant, right?
Mm-hmm.
He makes a conscious choice to become one.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is the detail that Cervantes includes in this transformation, like right from the beginning, the naming.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah.
And that's actually a great example of how you start to see that Don Quixote is not just some, like, silly old man.
Right.
The names that he chooses for himself and his horse, they're carefully thought out. It's almost comically grand.
It's true, yeah. Don Quixote de La Mancha. He adds his region like it's like a royal title.
Exactly. He's modeling himself after the knights in those romance novels, the ones he's constantly reading.
Right.
He's trying to elevate himself, to become legendary like them. But then you have the horse, Rocinante.
Which, let's be real, is kind of a funny name for a horse that's supposed to be this magnificent steed.
Right, and Cervantes knows it's funny. The name Rocinante, it's actually a blend of words meaning workhorse and noble steed. Mm-hmm. So it's like this subtle nod to the contradictions within Don Quixote himself. It's that clash between his grand ambitions and his pretty average reality.
And it's not even just the names. He spends like a whole week making a helmet.
Oh, I love this part.
Out of cardboard.
Which predictably shatters the second he tries it out.
Of course.
But that's Don Quixote for you. Mm-hmm. Reality just can't get in the way of his fantasies.
Oh,
he just kind of reinforces the helmet with iron bars this time, and he just keeps going.
That is some serious determination. So he sets off, leaves home for the first time, and you can practically feel him hesitate for a second.
Oh, yeah.
Like he realizes maybe just for a moment he hasn't actually, been knighted.
Yeah. And this is a great example of how Cervantes gives us this little peek into Don Quixote's mind, and it's surprisingly sharp.
Right.
He understands this little technicality, but does he stop? No. He figures out how to rationalize it. He decides that, he'll just find someone to knight him along the way.
Right.
Just like in the romances he's read. It's total self-deception.
Yeah.
But it also shows just how much he believes in his own destiny.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And that delusion, it's on full display when he has his first encounter, right? He comes across a group of muleteers, totally normal guys, and in his mind, they become
adventurous enemies. It's amazing. Cervantes uses language so effectively here. He'll describe the scene realistically, like from the muleteers' point of view, just normal dudes, and then bam, he flips it. Shows us this warped, exaggerated way that Don Quixote sees everything.
So right away, from the very beginning, we see this constant clash between reality and what Don Quixote wishes was real.
Totally. Yeah.
And that's just the first example.
And the thing is, it's not just played for laughs, which it is. It's funny.
Yeah.
But it also gets you thinking, how much of what any of us believes is just, shaped by what we want, by what we expect?
It's true.
How often are we seeing what we want to see, even if it's not real?
Whoa. Okay, so this book is already getting pretty deep.
I know, right?
But before we go any further, we have to talk about another main character who we haven't met yet. Sancho Panza.
Of course.
So Don Quixote needs a squire, obviously, and he convinces this practical farmer to come with him by promising him
incredible riches, of course, and let's not forget the governorship of an island.
Right. Which, that's a pretty sweet deal if you're a farmer who wants a change of pace.
Right.
But it really highlights their differences. Don Quixote totally lost in his fantasies.
Yeah.
And Sancho Panza just grounded in everyday life, being practical.
And that's what makes them so great together. You have the dreamer and the realist, the idealist and the pragmatist.
And they're thrown into these ridiculous, often hilarious situations.
And they're on this journey together. It's fantastic.
It really is. And speaking of their journey, they have some pretty crazy misadventures. One thing that stood out to me was how specific Don Quixote's rules for fighting are.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Like, he tells Sancho Panza when he's allowed to help him and when he can't, very clearly.
Oh, I love those parts.
Yeah.
Again, it's Cervantes blending humor with these deeper questions about morality. Like, Don Quixote won't let Sancho interfere if he's fighting other knights.
Because, of course, a knight wouldn't need help against just any opponent. It has to be a fair fight.
Exactly. But if it's just some, common rabble, then Sancho's allowed to step in.
Right, exactly. And this is where Cervantes uses humor, not just to be funny, but to subtly critique how absurd these chivalric codes are that Don Quixote follows so strictly.
Totally.
Because even Sancho Panza, who's all about common sense, can see that these rules don't really work in the real world.
Which, they kind of don't.
Yeah.
And that leads us to, I think, maybe the most famous example of Don Quixote's unique worldview, the windmills.
Oh, here we go, the windmills.
He sees those on the horizon, and in his mind, they're giants.
Right.
They have to be vanquished.
Monsters, yeah. And, well, he charges at them. It's such a classic scene, and everyone always remembers the windmills.
Right.
But they don't talk about why he sees giants there to begin with.
Exactly. That's the important part. He's not just like running around attacking things for no reason.
Right.
No, in his head, he's got this whole backstory figured out. He's convinced these are giants sent by some evil magician.
Oh, totally.
It's Cervantes, again, using humor to point out Don Quixote's delusions, but it's also really clever because it makes you wonder, what is real, right?
Right.
Is it what we see? Or is reality what we believe, what we're scared of, what we want?
It makes you wonder.
And that question, it means even more today than it did back then, don't you think?
Definitely.
We're bombarded with information and misinformation constantly now.
So are you saying that Don Quixote is basically a 17th century take on fake news?
Maybe. But let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Okay.
We still have a lot more to unpack in these early chapters.
We do, yeah.
We've got mistaken identities, totally warped worldviews, and some pretty comical mishaps.
That's true. What's really stood out to you so far about the book?
Honestly, I think it's how Cervantes can have you laughing 1 minute.
Yeah, that's true.
And then the next, he makes you pause and really think about what's going on.
Right.
It's that mix of humor and, real insight that makes Don Quixote more than just a funny book.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And this is just the beginning. Don Quixote's journey, it takes him and us through even crazier adventures and deeper looks at love and loss. And it even makes us look at our own relationship with stories and how much they influence how we see the world.
Wow. All right, I'm hooked. We'll be right back to dive into the rest of Don Quixote after this.
It's funny how these situations Don Quixote gets himself into, as absurd as they are, they make you think about human nature in these really interesting ways.
Oh, okay.
Like, remember when he runs into those wineskins?
Oh, you mean when he thinks they're giants again?
Exactly.
I'll admit, I laughed out loud at that part.
It's hilarious.
Like, Don Quixote, come on, you've done this before.
But when you think about it, he's so used to seeing the world through this lens of chivalry.
Right.
That even the most normal things just become these grand, important symbols in his head.
True.
Like those wineskins.
Yeah.
In a way, they represent this very human thing we do, where we just inflate how important something looks.
Oh, yes.
How important material things are. Okay, and Don Quixote, with his head in the clouds and his ideals blinding him, he just totally misses it.
So Cervantes is using this funny scene to make fun of what we value as a society. The things we decide are a big deal.
Exactly. It's subtle. It's clever.
Right.
He's woven this critique into this already funny adventure story.
And this whole theme of seeing what you want to see, putting your own desires onto reality.
Right.
It's even stronger when you get to Don Quixote's whole concept of love, don't you think?
Ah, yes.
Dulcinea del Toboso.
Dulcinea.
The woman who's never actually in the story, but still has this hold over our knight.
It's amazing.
It's kind of crazy when you think about it.
Yeah.
Don Quixote has created this whole image of who Dulcinea is.
Yeah.
This perfect woman.
He's devoted to her.
He is. Dedicates all these adventures to her. And she's all in his head.
Completely.
He's in love with an idea.
Right.
Just the fantasy that he's projected onto this woman he barely knows.
This is where Cervantes gets to play around with a popular idea of the time, which was this whole concept of courtly love.
Okay.
You know, in those chivalric stories, Don Quixote loves so much.
Yeah.
Courtly love is all about making a woman into this ideal.
Right.
Putting her up on a pedestal.
But Cervantes takes that and he flips it, right?
He does. He shows us how absurd it really is.
How different it is from what Don Quixote believes.
That gap between fantasy and reality.
So if Don Quixote's view of love is so messed up, does Cervantes give us a different way to think about love?
Well, he doesn't make it easy and give us all the answers.
Right.
But he does give us other love stories in the book. Ones that are more complicated.
Like Cardenio and Lucinda.
Exactly.
Cardenio, the guy who just pours his heart out about Lucinda.
Yeah.
And how his friend Fernando betrayed him.
It's so real.
Yeah.
So raw.
Especially compared to how Don Quixote sees love.
Totally. Cardenio's love for Lucinda.
It's messy. It's painful. It's full of all those complications you find in the real world, you know?
And we have Dorothea.
Right, Dorothea.
Disguised as a man,
Yeah.
trying to get her honor back.
She asks Don Quixote for help.
And her story's all tangled up with Fernando's betrayal, too.
It is.
It's like Cervantes is connecting all these different stories.
It is, yeah.
Love, loss, betrayal.
It's more interesting than just what Don Quixote can see with his simple worldview.
And Dorothea's disguise
Yes.
adds a whole other layer to the story.
Right. Tell me more about that.
Because it plays with this illusion versus reality thing we've been talking about.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
I mean, she's literally pretending to be someone else.
Right, right. It highlights how easy it is to manipulate appearances.
Yeah.
How what we think about other people, and
Yeah.
even ourselves, can be affected by things we don't even think about.
It's like that theme that things aren't always what they seem.
Yes.
Which pops up everywhere in Don Quixote.
So we have mistaken identities, skewed views of love, and now characters straight up playing with illusion.
That's a lot to keep track of.
It makes you think, is Cervantes trying to say something about stories? Like how powerful they are?
Oh, interesting.
I mean, Don Quixote's delusions all started because he's obsessed with these chivalric romances.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
And it's part of why Don Quixote feels so modern.
Really?
Cervantes isn't afraid to admit how powerful stories can be.
Okay.
For better or worse.
Interesting.
In fact, there's a point in the story where the characters actually debate chivalric literature.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
They're like debating Don Quixote's whole worldview
VR.
to his face.
It's brilliant. It's like this meta-narrative technique that Cervantes uses.
What's that?
Basically, it's a way for him to talk about the criticisms people could make about his own book, but he does it in the book itself.
Oh, that's clever.
Right. Some characters are saying that chivalric romances give people unrealistic expectations.
Oh.
That they make people want to escape from real life.
Right, right.
But then other characters say, no, they inspire people.
Yeah.
They make people want to be noble, to do heroic things.
It's like Cervantes wants us, the readers, to be a part of this debate.
Yes.
He's asking us to think about how stories can change what we believe, what we do.
He is.
Even how we see the world.
And then it gets even more blurry.
Oh, it does.
That line between reality and fiction.
Okay.
Remember when Don Quixote's tricked into thinking he's cursed?
Oh, yeah.
He does all these crazy penances.
He does, yeah.
Even hangs from a tree.
Oh, right.
Because that's what a real knight would do, in his mind.
It's hilarious, but also kind of disturbing.
I know.
Because it shows how easily we can be manipulated.
Right.
Especially if we believe in a certain story.
Exactly. It's like Cervantes is showing us the power of stories.
Yeah.
How they can inspire us, but also how they can deceive us.
And that's what makes Don Quixote more than just a funny book about a guy who fights windmills.
Right. It's this exploration of how we tell stories, how we relate to stories.
But we'll get into that and the book's legacy after the break.
It's going to be good.
You know, for a book that's obsessed with stories, it doesn't really have a happy ending, does it?
No, not really.
Don Quixote ends up back home in a cage, still believing all this stuff that's not real.
It's sad.
It really is.
Yep.
So is that it? Is Don Quixote's defeat just tragic? Or is there something kind of, I don't know, admirable about it?
That's the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, he never gives up on what he believes, even when everyone's telling him he's wrong.
That's true. He never compromises on his ideals, even when he's faced with, like, being laughed at.
Exactly. And that's what makes him such a compelling character.
It's true. We laugh at his misadventures, but you have to give him credit for sticking to his guns.
Exactly. And Cervantes doesn't tell us what to think.
Which is interesting.
He shows us Don Quixote with all his flaws, all his contradictions.
Right.
And we have to decide for ourselves.
Okay, yeah.
Is he a fool? Is he a hero?
Is he both?
Maybe it's the fact that he's always striving, always reaching for something.
That's a good point. And that makes me think about the book's legacy.
Yeah.
People call Don Quixote one of the first modern novels.
They do, yeah.
Why is that? What makes it so different?
Well, it broke the mold, you know.
How so?
The stories before Don Quixote were much simpler.
Okay.
But Cervantes brought in this psychological depth.
Right.
Social commentary, even this awareness of storytelling itself.
Right.
It's like he's winking at the reader.
It's true, like when he has the characters debate chivalric romances.
Exactly. Cervantes knew exactly what he was doing there.
He put those criticisms in the mouths of his own characters.
He did. And that self-awareness, it makes Don Quixote feel so modern.
Right.
Like it was written yesterday, not centuries ago.
And the writing itself.
Oh, incredible.
The way Cervantes uses language, it's so lively, so funny.
And so full of depth. He'll make you laugh to make you think.
It's a really impressive balance.
He's a true master.
Yeah. So, groundbreaking novel, hilarious and thoughtful story, writing that's still amazing after all these years.
I know.
No wonder it's a masterpiece.
It really shows you how powerful literature can be.
Yeah.
How a great story can last for centuries.
It's true. Don Quixote gives us a look at what it means to be human.
It does.
Makes us laugh, makes us cry, stays with us.
It really does.
We could keep talking about Don Quixote forever.
We could?
But the best way to experience it is to read it yourself.
I agree.
Even if you just read a chapter.
You'll get a sense of what makes it so special.
Yeah. You might be surprised how relevant it still is.
And how funny.
Exactly. Maybe you'll even see a little bit of yourself in Don Quixote.
It's possible.
That desire for a better world, that belief that stories can change our lives.
Powerful stuff.
It really is. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.